the deterioration between the relationship between Canberra and Beijing is nothing new, right? In your report, what was most noteworthy about what you heard from industry participants?
Look, the principal thing which we've heard, and it was repeated across the 5 surveys we've done now, is international competitiveness is really striking Australian businesses hard. We've got to do things that improve the costs of doing business in Australia so they can be competitive in many markets around the world, not just the high-priced markets.
How hard is that competitiveness going to be, particularly when you talk about diversifying to other, ex-China markets when borders are closed and people can't travel to do business?
Well, certainly the border closures is a real issue. People can't get out into the market, they can't build their relationships and shake hands with people, meet them face to face, but they have improved and gone directly online. Their experience has been really great, and many firms are really experiencing more demand than they've ever seen before. It's seen really interesting dynamics around some of that too, where the brand Australia has shrunk down to local brands like Tasmania or regional brands as well, and people are seeing real value in that. We've got to build on some of those things which are going to be the assets that we can accelerate our growth post-COVID. And fingers crossed we can get out and travel again into the new markets.
What markets are Australian businesses more optimistic about right now?
Australian businesses are pretty keen. The China story was a mixed one. There's many businesses doing very well in China. Still, we've got some trade tensions with there. People are looking forward to the trade agreements that we're trying to negotiate with Europe and the United Kingdom. India was a very strong focus for many countries that'd like to be able to do more. And of course, Africa and Latin America shone as areas that we need to do better in. To improve our relationships there. We don't have a lot of understanding, and we've got to improve that quite dramatically.
What do policymakers need to do to support Australian businesses diversifying markets?
Well, some of what we found is that there's a lot of respect for the information and services which are provided, not only by the government, by chambers of commerce, industry associations, etc. But it does seem to be a confused landscape. There is so much information around and so much competitiveness, if you like, between the organisations. We've got to build a better Team Australia approach. We've got our difficulties, of course, with the states and that is the Australian states, and how they're working together, the different rules and complexity of just doing business in Australia, our tax system, our industrial relations system. We've got many areas that we can work on, but the story should be we've got a bright future. We just have to harness it.
Part of that future, a lot of respondents saying that we should focus on an FTA with Europe. How difficult is that going to be, given Europe has already made its position clear about Australia's climate inaction? When you look at that and you look at Canberra's, I guess, inaction or strategy that it's pursued with Beijing, how frustrating is it that sort of the politics of it comes in to disrupt the trade?
Well, the Australian government and the European governments have been negotiating this for some time, and we look forward to them reaching a successful conclusion shortly. The UK, we think, will probably be a little quicker than the European one. But all of these demands are interesting and important, and the Australian government has been dealing with those things, and you're seeing a lot of coalescence around the ideas that the Australian government's been putting forward around technology, not taxes, as the way to address climate change. R&D is certainly some of the way that we can do that, and Australia's been developing, certainly recently, very strong new market opportunities around hydrogen and different other sources of energy. There's some great projects going on with the export of solar energy out of Northern Australia into Southeast Asia, for example. So I think it's a bright future, and we'll be able to address those issues that are being raised, and they're important ones to be raised, but we've also got to concentrate on the traditional trade areas as well.
I do wonder what kind of sentiment you've gathered in this report, right? If you're a wine exporter in the Barossa, how are they feeling about what's going on at Canberra, or the lack of going on between, talks between Beijing and Canberra?
Well, a lot of those exporters would certainly prefer it to be a different landscape than it is. In the end, business just wants to do business.
Because they're saying that there's not much firm-to-firm negotiation or dialogue going on either.
Very difficult to get in and out of the country or even out of Australia before you can get to anywhere else. The political machinations at one end, the business and others just want to get on and do it. And we saw it, and this is some of the juxtaposition in the China market, is we saw Australian firms doing very well in some of the Singles Day sales and other online means to address a marketplace. And then we have these areas where there's specific tension. The wine industry has pivoted to a certain extent. Some of them have come back on shore and much more focus on the domestic market because that's easier that you can do. Some have looked for new markets and been very successful in gaining some of those new markets. And of course the gap being left from Australia's product not being in China means that other nations' product might have shifted in there, and that's left gaps in other places around the world. So we've seen that shifting trade diversion action going on too, but some of the figures are showing that Australia has actually done improved trade out of the situation as opposed to a completely negative outcome.
Have we seen much impact when it comes to labour shortages and the other, flow-on effects of borders closing and migration coming to a stop?
We're certainly starting to see those biting hard now. Companies indicating that they can't get the skills that they need, the transfer of appropriate staff. Not having backpackers around in Australia, for example, is impacting a number of the agricultural industries and the tourism industries who rely on those people as workforces. The same thing with students, not having students in Australia in the numbers that we were used to as well. They all form a base to our labour market, and so we will see increasing tension in that while ever we've got the borders closed. So we urge the government to open the border up, obviously in a safe way with countries we can depend upon their health systems, but we've got to look for novel ways that we can approach this and get our borders open and economy humming along nicely again.